Well, if you weren't convinced somehow before, the trade of Marshon Lattimore lets you know that the New Orleans Saints rebuild is fully underway. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints, as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst with WWL TV. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, I hope you aren't tired of hearing from me. I hope you aren't tired of seeing me, because we got another emergency episode for you here. The New Orleans Saints trading away star cornerback Marshon Lattimore. We're going to discuss what this means for the future of the cornerback position for the New Orleans Saints. Is cornerback a possibility for this team in the NFL draft? We'll dive into that. We're also going to take a look at Alontae Taylor, who I think is the future at the cornerback position for the New Orleans Saints, at least in the short term, but has the chance to prove to be the long-term future in the next 8 games. We're going to lead this all off, though, with a look at what this really means for the New Orleans Saints. One day after firing their head coach, they move away from Marshon Lattimore, trading him to the Houston Commanders, the Washington Commanders. And this shows you that the rebuild is underway and the Saints are taking this seriously. We appreciate you very much, as always, for being an everydayer and for making this your first listen of the day every day here on the show, which is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. The New Orleans Saints rebuild is officially underway. It's here. The New Orleans Saints are finally doing it. And look, they're not going to do a whole tear it down to the studs and start trading away a bunch of different assets or anything like that. But they certainly traded away one of their most prized possessions, one of their biggest draft pieces in trading Marshon Lattimore to the Washington Commanders. What this means moving forward, and I'll get to draft compensation here in a second, but what this means moving forward is that the Saints are fully in evaluation mode, and they're looking at what their future is going to look like. This trade shows you that the Saints are about the attitude now of out with the old, in with the what will be new, right? I'm not going to say in with the new just yet, because you don't get anything back for these players until you actually go out there and turn those draft picks into actual players, right? So let's take a look at the New Orleans Saints draft capital in this one, how this trade worked out. The Washington Commanders are the ones who receive Marshon Lattimore. They get Marshon Lattimore and a 5th-round draft pick here in 2025. The New Orleans Saints get in return a 3rd-round draft pick, a 4th-round draft pick, and their 6th-round draft pick that they originally traded to Washington for defensive tackle John Ridgeway III before the season began. So it's Lattimore and a 5th for a 3rd, 4th, and 6th is the way that you're looking at this trade. If you want to, you could fold John Ridgeway into the trade as well and look at it that way, that the Saints got a 3rd, 4th, 6th, and Ridgeway for Lattimore and a 5th. I don't care. It doesn't matter. The big thing is that what you basically got was a day 2 pick for Marshon Lattimore and a pick swap is effectively what you got from 5th to 4th, allowed you to jump up around there. So that gives the Saints a 1st-round pick, a 2nd-round pick, 2 3rd-round picks, 2 4th-round picks, no 5th, a 6th, and a 7th, or a 7th that should be expected from a compensatory selection. So it gives you a pick in almost every round and all that. And so now you get the opportunity to either package some of those picks together. 2 3rds can get you into the 2nd. You have 2 4ths. 2 4ths can get you into maybe the latter part, like the compensatory area of the 3rd. So there are a few things that the Saints are going to be able to do with that. Or you draft a player in the 1st, you draft a player in the 2nd, you draft 2 players in the 3rd, you draft 2 players in the 4th, and that's almost as big as any draft class the New Orleans Saints have been drafting as of late because of all of the trade-ups that they typically do. You could walk away with 6 players in the top 4 rounds. That's a very good place to be. That's the positive of this. The negative of this is, of course, you traded away Marshon Lattimore. And I think a lot of people will feel different ways about that. Look, Marshon Lattimore getting traded away isn't directly correlative to the loss to the Carolina Panthers sending the New Orleans Saints into a fire sale or anything like that, where they fire their head coach and then they trade away Marshon Lattimore. There have been questions about Marshon Lattimore. Remember, at the beginning of the season, there was talk about Marshon Lattimore potentially being traded away because of a disconnect between he and the Saints organization. It felt like if a trade was going to happen, it could have happened then. And then the Saints did that weird restructure thing in December. It's where it kind of opened up a lot of possibilities for them. Then they let the option bonus kick in by hitting a certain date, which ended up prorating moving forward. So it didn't kill them salary cap wise. And now they're still able to trade him away and they get some good draft capital out of it. So there's pluses and minuses to this move. It's one of the few moves that I've seen the New Orleans Saints in particular make in terms of trading a player away, in which it feels like they got something reasonable in return. There have been a lot of those trades where you kind of go, wow, that's pocket change, or I'm surprised they didn't get more than that, whatever it might be. This is one that actually feels reasonable. And when you trade somebody away that is as high caliber a player as Marshon Lattimore, who is one of the top cornerbacks in the NFL, who is or was the 2017 defensive rookie of the year. He is all of those things, and he is one of the best cornerbacks to ever play New Orleans Saints football. At the same time, he's had inconsistencies. At the same time, he's been dealing with injuries, right? Hasn't been able to finish either of the last 2 seasons with injury. I call those freak injuries. I don't think that they're really illustrative of his actual ability to stay healthy. A lacerated kidney. I'm sorry, you didn't have your kidney lift weights. What? Like, there's no way that you prepare for that. But this year, he's missed 2 games with a hamstring. That probably dropped the salary or dropped the trade compensation that the Saints could get back, despite the fact that he is one of the best corners in the NFL. That's just the reality of the situation. But it doesn't mean that you don't make the move when you get a good return, and the Saints got a good return. The Saints got a good return in this one. So this is a move that we saw coming. Insiders knew all about kind of the inner workings of this a little early as we were getting information throughout the day. The teams that were involved, all that. There were several teams involved. Kansas City Chiefs, I'm sure you heard about, and others. But the Washington Commanders are the ones that get it done. So the New Orleans Saints do this. It doesn't have a big time impact on their salary cap, but what it does is that it keeps them from having to spend $18 million next year that would have effectively been restructured and then kicked into further years. In terms of the overall salary cap savings in 2025, it's a couple $100,000 once you roll over this year's savings to next season. But that's a better situation than what they would have been in, where they would have had to restructure the contract in order to get under the salary cap and then push more money down the road. The interesting thing now is that you've lost one of your mechanisms in getting under the salary cap as you sit $61 million over the salary cap right now, which means the Saints are going to have to get very creative this offseason, or more surprises need to be on the way. We'll see which one that ends up being. All right, coming up next, I want to dive into what the Saints do at cornerback in the short term moving forward. Then we'll turn our focus to the long term. And I think both of those conversations deserve to be led off by one player and one player alone. That is former Tennessee Volunteer Alontae Taylor. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Game Time, my favorite place to go to grab tickets for your favorite events, whether you're looking at sporting events, concerts, comedy, theater, like musicals and stuff like that, and much more. You're going to find it wherever you are. Just download the Game Time app, open it up, pick your city, and then bang, you get access to thousands of tickets to all the different events around where you are, not just where you live, but wherever you are. And I want to introduce you as well to Game Time Picks. It's a curated experience that makes it even easier to save on the tickets that you're buying without having to sift through those thousands and thousands of seats, tickets, and options. There's also all-in pricing, which you can toggle on. Gives you all the prices up front. That way there's no surprise at checkout. You can take all the guesswork out of buying tickets today with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use that promo code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Today's episode also brought to you by friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, where you can go to tackle the beginning of this NFL season, or really the middle of this NFL season, as we get past the trade deadline here this afternoon. Right now, new customers are going to be put $5 down and get $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet win. So that way, when you have a hunch in the middle of a game, you can also go and open up the app. You can check out the latest stats, the play-by-play, and all of so much more that you're going to be able to find all in the same place where you were originally placing your bet. Right now, the New Orleans Saints 3-point underdogs at home against the Atlanta Falcons. You think they're going to get the Darren Rizzi bump, that one-game bump when you change head coach? Well, maybe that's a place for you to go, or a bet for you to go and check out. You can do so over at FanDuel.com. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with America's #1 sportsbook. All right, family, continuing on with another bonus episode of Locked On Saints. I'm not even tired. Keep giving me news. I'm not even tired. I'm ready to do more. Y'all want another podcast after this? I'll do another one. I don't care. There's so much going on around the New Orleans Saints. And look, it's easy to be it's easy to be conflicted about this, right? Because a player like Marshon Lattimore is a beloved player amongst the Saints fan base. He was an absolute star for this team and is going to go down in a lot of people's books as the best cornerback in NFL history. Now, of course, you've got others out there that were fantastic in this franchise, but he's going to go down as one of the best at the very least. 28 years old right now and everything, like kind of in the prime. So this gives him an opportunity to go out there to Washington, a team that's competing right now. Saints kind of do right by him in a way, sitting him to a team that's clearly the best team in its division. Yeah, the Philadelphia Eagles are winning, but they stink and the coaching isn't great. And so there's like enough there for you to feel like, all right, Washington can really kind of pull this off. Now they had Marshon Lattimore, a pretty good situation for him. And again, a good situation for New Orleans. And one of the reasons why the Saints were able to make this move, sorry about my voice cracking there, is because of the talent that they have otherwise in that cornerback room, right? Alontae Taylor, Kool-Aid McKinstry, who they drafted this year. Yeah, he just missed a game with a hamstring injury, I understand, but still is a part of that equation for you. Rico Payton, the undrafted free agent wide receiver that has been great, has been really impressive for New Orleans. Shamar Jean-Charles, who had one of the best interceptions we've ever seen in last week's game against Carolina. And of course, there's still the lingering question around Paulson Adebo. But here's what I'll say. Much like the firing of head coach Dennis Allen, these are the kinds of trades that become necessary when you're turning the page, right? When you're going to the next chapter in your organization, you're building that new era. And one of the players that's going to help you institute that new era, institute that new leadership on your defensive side of the football must be, not only can be, not only should be, absolutely must be cornerback Alontae Taylor. Alontae Taylor was a career boundary corner. When I say boundary corner, I mean playing on the outside, not playing in the slot. So playing closer to the out of bounds areas or the boundary. So he was a boundary corner or perimeter corner. You can use those interchangeably throughout his entire career over at Tennessee. He arrived in New Orleans and impressed when he had to step into starting roles on the outside during his rookie year and looked great. Couldn't get his first interception his rookie season, but always was right there. And in fact, there were a couple of times, you think about Tampa, you think about San Francisco, where he probably did get his first interception, but there was either a penalty or a bad call in terms of like, was it in bounds? Was it out of bounds? All those other things. And then all of a sudden, the Saints moved him to the slot, a place that he had never played throughout his collegiate career, a place that he did not work at his rookie season. He was moved to the slot in 2023 and struggled there big time in learning a brand new position, to be expected, right? Remember, the Saints went from Chauncey Gardner-Johnson to Bradley Roby. Then they moved on from Bradley Roby and then kind of shoehorned Alontae Taylor into the slot. And that was tough. That was very tough for him. It wasn't his position. It wasn't the position he was drafted to play. It wasn't the position that got him drafted. It was the position that they put him in. And he struggled there. Let's be fair, he struggled there in 2023. Then he shows back up, and I will tell you right now, there was frustration around all that. I've heard every bit of it. There was frustration around him having to make that move. Then fast forward to the 2024 offseason, and there's this Alontae Taylor that has just accepted his role, said, no, I know what they want me to do, so I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do that to the best of my ability. He had a bit of a Taysom Hill mindset about him. Asked me to do it, I'll do it. Gave up, not gave up, but, kind of eschewed any of the bad feelings, bad vibes, anything like that. Pushed all that aside and said, you want me in the slot? Fine. I'll be the best dang slot cornerback you're going to have. And to be honest, I know he's allowed a lot of yards and he's been involved in some explosive plays, but his target to snap ratio and his reception to snap ratio, as well as his reception to target ratio, are some of the lowest in the NFL, even while still getting comfortable in the slot. Move him towards the outside, which he finally got an opportunity to do a lot more of last week with both Marshon Lattimore and Paulson Adebo and Kool-Aid McKinstry and Rico Payton all out. He played on the outside against Carolina, 100 snaps so far playing at wide corner. So out wide instead of in the slot, targeted 6 times, 3 catches, 63 yards. That is Alontae Taylor. He's got a tattoo behind one of his ears that says, I'm him. Now's his opportunity to prove that he is indeed him. Because he now becomes the leader on the Saints secondary when it comes to the cornerback position. Your leader in the secondary is still veteran cornerback, or veteran safety Tyrann Mathieu. There's no doubt about that. But Paulson Adebo is done for the year. Kool-Aid McKinstry's a rookie. Marshon Lattimore just got traded away. Rico Payton's a rookie. Shamar Jean-Charles looked great in this game up against Carolina, but is still a guy coming off the practice squad. Alontae Taylor has been on your roster for 3 seasons. He's been in your system for 3 seasons now. He is the guy that deserves every opportunity to become the leader in that room and to become a vocal presence on that defense and finally play the position he should have been playing in from the beginning, which is on the outside. Now, I get it. The Saints had Marshon Lattimore. They had Paulson Adebo. I understand that. But they risked it big time when they shoehorned him into the slot and then potentially destroyed his confidence. Thankfully, they don't come more confident than Alontae Taylor does. And so he was able to maintain that confidence, and now he gets the opportunity to move ahead and do this. So I am all about where the Saints can head with Alontae Taylor, even if it's just for the short term for right now. Even if it's just for the short term right now, to where you give him these next 8 games to start on the outside, opposite Kool-Aid McKinstry, if he's healthy to go, Rico Payton if he's not, if he's still not healthy, then Shamar Jean-Charles, and then go with Ugo Amadi in the slot or one of those other corners in the slot. Give Alontae Taylor his time on the outside. Let him develop and grow into the player that you just traded away in Marshon Lattimore, right? That's the type of player, right? A guy that you can leave out on an island. You can trust his speed. And I'll tell you that Alontae Taylor plays with a lot more technique. Alontae Taylor plays with a lot more things that he can fall back on when the raw talent might not necessarily be there in a way that Marshon Lattimore was raw talent. And I'm not saying that Alontae Taylor is not raw talent. Marshon Lattimore was just different. Okay, we know that. But Alontae Taylor has raw talent and has fundamentals, basics to fall back on. That saves you big time as a starting cornerback in the NFL. He now gets the opportunity to do that. So that's the way that I'm looking for. All right. So with Alontae Taylor, the Saints now get to embark on their new future on their defense. They continue to get to kind of build their sort of, future, their rebuild, all those other pieces. You'll see Kool-Aid McKinstry on the outside opposite him. And I think that the Saints should try to pursue bringing back Paulson Adebo as well. I think that that's another thing that helps you. I want to dive into how that works. And I want to take a look at the 2025 NFL draft. Could the New Orleans Saints go into the draft looking for a starting corner as well? And then I'll remind everybody, since we're here live as I'm recording this, what the compensation was and what happens with the salary cap. We'll dive into all that next here as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at BetterHelp. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp Therapy Online has been massively impactful for me. I'm somebody that does therapy on a consistent basis. And one of the things that I've learned through therapy is the idea of gratitude, the season of gratitude. I've always been very good at having gratitude for other people, right? In terms of the things that they've done for me, the things that we've done together, all those other things. I'm incredibly grateful for you. Look at you being here in what has been a tumultuous season, a tumultuous week for the New Orleans Saints, and you've continued to show up and change my life on a daily basis. That to me is something I can show gratitude to, but something that we don't often show gratitude towards is ourselves. And sometimes we need a nice little pat on the back every now and then. Sometimes you deserve that. So that's something I've learned a bit through therapy. So you can learn things like that and much more by trying therapy out. So if you've been thinking about doing so, I highly recommend giving BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be suited to your schedule because it's flexible, all those other things as well. And now you can try to let the gratitude flow, for instance, with BetterHelp. So visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get started today and get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrap it up today's episode, this bonus episode, as we take a look at the next steps, right? So we took a look at the short-term impact of trading away Marshon Lattimore, right? It makes your defense, it's a hit to your defense. Like, let's not pretend like there's not a drop off here, right? There's a hit to your defense because of how good Marshon Lattimore was. I don't know how we want to talk about it, but still is. He's still very good. And it does open the door, though, for the development of some of your younger guys in Alontae Taylor, Kool-Aid, McKinstry. That's what this time is about. When you fire a head coach, you go into the interim head coach era, right? What we're going to call the Riz era right now for the New Orleans Saints. And you can't stop me. I'm going to do it. You can tell me you don't want me to call it that. I'm going to. It's the era of Riz. Here we are. And so what that gives you is an opportunity to be able to evaluate your roster, right? What's the youth on your roster? What do you have? Who do you build around? All these other things. In tomorrow's episode, I'm going to wax philosophical a little bit more, not as much as I did today, but a little bit more about Alontae Taylor again, because I think Alontae Taylor is one of the guys that you do build your future around. But now you also have the opportunity to bring in more young players for that future. So now that the Saints have traded away Marshon Lattimore, who was a first-round cornerback back in 2017, many people are going to wonder, well, are the New Orleans Saints now going to spend a first-round pick on a cornerback in order to replace him? And here's the thing, they don't have to. Asterisk, not pause. I was about to say pause. I didn't say anything pause-worthy, but asterisk, as long as the Saints do find at the end of this season, or by the end of the season, that Alontae Taylor, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Rico Payton, Shamar Jean-Charles, that there are a pair of those corners to build around. And I think as long as Alontae Taylor and Kool-Aid McKinstry answer that call, you're good. You're Gucci at that point. So if you're able to do that, then I don't think you have to spend a first-round pick on a cornerback. Now, if you're picking in the top 3 and all of a sudden Travis Hunter's there and you can use him at corner, you can use him at wide receiver, you can let him do what he wants to do during training camp and then put him in the position where you think is best, great. You're fine there because Travis Hunter gives you so many different options. You got to figure out where he's going to be in the NFL, which is going to be one side of the football. Or more likely is going to be one side of the football. We'll see. You know what I mean? Like, nobody expected Taysom to be Taysom. So I don't want to make Travis not Travis if he can be. And so I think that that's the exception. That's the player that you can go out and say, oh, I want a playmaker. Pluck. And I don't care what side of the football you put him on, he's going to make plays. And that's what's so good about Travis Hunter. It's why I would draft Travis Hunter in the top 3 before I draft any of these quarterbacks in this class in the top 3. As I speak right now on November 5th, we'll see what the rest of the season looks like for those rookie quarterbacks or those upcoming rookie quarterbacks. But if you're able to invest instead a first-round pick in an offensive lineman or a Teteroa McMillan, the big wide receiver out of Arizona or something like that, do that and then come back to corner at a later point, because the Saints are not going to all of a sudden forget how to develop cornerback talent because Dennis Allen is gone. They know what they're doing, and we don't know what the new staff is going to look like, anything like that. We don't even know who's going to be in charge of that by that time. But if you're able to bring people in and you can continue to develop those corners, or you've already developed the corners that are already in the building, then you're in a good place. So the Saints don't have to rush to a whole bunch of that. So now that the Saints have traded Marshon Lattimore, it doesn't mean that they have to go and spend a first-round pick on a cornerback. They can wait and they can do that. If you can keep Joe Woods around, if you can keep Marcus Robertson around, you have Joe Woods, the defensive coordinator, Marcus Robertson, the cornerback or defensive backs coach. If you're able to keep those guys around, you have development potential when it comes to what you can do at corner in your future without having to necessarily go out there and shell out that first-round pick. So that's what I look at. So here's the next thing that I'll mention. And let me clarify too. I said that the Saints won't forget how to develop secondary talent just because Dennis Allen is gone. Yes, Dennis Allen's secondary focus and his specialty was a secondary. Absolutely. No doubt about that. But it doesn't mean that the other guys that you already have in the building can't do it if they stick around. We got to see what the rest of the staff looks like too. So now I think that the next piece that you look at is, what do you do with Paulson Adebo? right? A little bit more long-term here, looking at free agency. Paulson Adebo had a broken femur, which we've only really seen a couple times in the NFL. In each of the cases that it has happened, those players have made it back to playing some kind of football. The most recent, I want to say the name was Demarcus Johnson, if I remember correctly, because I think Demarcus Robinson is the wide receiver with the Rams. Forgive my memory at the moment. But the wide receiver that had that happen, he came back, but he played in like the XFL, USFL, that kind of like spring league and stuff like that. So if you can get Paulson Adebo back on a cheap deal or affordable deal, let me say it that way, because he's coming back off of that injury, it could be worth it. It could be worth it. But the Saints could be looking to say out with the old, in with the new, just like we discussed earlier. So while Paulson Adebo should remain an option for the New Orleans Saints, I get if that doesn't work. You know, he becomes a free agent at the end of the season. He should be healthy by then. He can get the opportunity to go out there and then figure out what, you know, is going to, what will work for him. You know what I mean? He might not be interested in returning to New Orleans either. We don't know, right? But I do think that there should be a conversation there about whether or not he wants to come back to New Orleans, what that looks like. It would be a one-year deal probably wherever he ends up, because that broken femur is something kind of weird you have to come back to and everything. And so all those pieces. So that's what you're looking at when it comes to kind of the long-term future of this position. You can invest it in the draft. Don't have to do it at a high level. You could still bring Paulson Adebo back. You've got guys like Alontae Taylor, Kool-Aid, McKinstry, and others that you can evaluate in the short term to get you ready for the long term. And of course, you know, draft picks galore. And so we'll see. Let me check to see if there were any other trades or anything else crazy happening. But for anybody that missed it, here's a quick recap on the trade. So it is Marshon Lattimore and a 5th round pick to the Washington Commanders for a 2nd, 3rd, and 6th round pick. This is all 2025 picks, by the way. So this is all in this upcoming draft. So the Saints trade Marshon Lattimore in a 5th to get a 4th, 6th, and 3rd for this season. The 6th round pick that they get back was the same 6th round pick that they traded to get John Ridgeway III, the defensive tackle, before the season. So I think a fair trade. I know a lot of people are going to say they should have gotten a 2nd round pick. You're not going to get one. He's literally presently injured. He's literally missed 2 games already with injury and everything like that. So a 3rd round pick is exactly what we said that they were probably going to get on this show at best. They didn't just get a 3rd round pick. They got a 3rd and a 4th by adding a 5th in. It's not bad. It's a good situation for them. And now they have some building blocks for their future. I can't wait to kind of come back to this conversation after the draft. Look at where they spent the 3rd. Look at where they spent the 4th. Look at where they spent the 6th, and then figure out, okay, so it was Marshon Lattimore for this player, and this player, or maybe some of those picks get packaged, whatever. I think that ends up kind of giving us a real indication of what this trade looks like. But as of right now, in terms of overall value, the Saints got the value that they probably should have gotten on this trade. All right, coming up in tomorrow's episode, y'all, we're going to be taking a look at the young players that this team needs to build its future around. We'll come back to more conversation around Marshon Lattimore. I'll remind you how ridiculously good Rashid Shaheed is, and we'll look at some of the other younger building blocks left on this roster as they survive, those that do survive the NFL trade deadline. Still a couple hours left at the time that I'm recording this. We'll see. If they do anything else crazy, we'll be right back here breaking it all down. We appreciate you very much, as always, making us your first listen of the day every day, and for being an everydayer here on the show. For your second listen, make sure you're going to check out Locked On NFL. I will see you tomorrow, taking a look at the young players the Saints should build around. Thank you very much for making this a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing, how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.